Our next speaker, again, Peggy has been the curse of the entire lecture series. Every night we've had to cancel. So we're glad to have her. Peggy Maniates, she's the Associate Director and Curator here at the museum. Prior to coming on board at the museum, she was employed in Chicago in the library system for 10 years. She's done graduate work in history as well as history education in New York, and just really helping to transform this museum into just a center that we can all be proud of, we can all use. This is just such a jewel in our community. We're so glad to have her. Please join me in welcoming Peggy Maniates.
Thank you. I'm so glad to finally be up here. I'm so glad that the curse is over. We're going to have great weather for the rest of the semester, and there's going to be no more snow. All right. Everyone always asks me, what exactly do you do around here? And I'll tell them, I'm the curator, I'm the archivist, and they kind of get glassy-eyed, and they look, better? I'll tell them I'm the curator, I am the archivist. They kind of get glassy-eyed and like, okay, what does that mean? What it really means is I end up being the storyteller for the museum. I end up collecting the artifacts, taking care of the artifacts, and then presenting the artifacts for everyone to enjoy and to learn and to kind of feel a part of what the whole museum is about. And so I'm the one that's always there. Tonight I'm going to give you guys fluff. After all the deep information that you've received, after all of the wonderful information you now know about what it was like to fly in the Pacific, what it was like to be a student at Muskegon Community College, I get to give you the fun stuff. I get to tell you what it was like to be on a submarine. I get to tell you about all the good stuff that happened because we have this wonderful submarine out here. And so that is tonight's presentation from us. It is what we get to keep in the archives that doesn't quite fit with putting out in the museum. And I have a lot of things. People give me wonderful things all the time, but it takes a while before I can collect enough artifacts to be able to put on an exhibit about things. Every exhibit that we have, it takes years and years and years of collecting. And so people give to us many wonderful things, but we have to hold on to them for time until we can put them together in such a way that it makes sense and it actually tells a story. So tonight's one of those short little stories. And as I'm talking, I want you to take a look over at the table here. On the table here, I have many of the artifacts, some of them that we have in the archives. And these are all specifically related to the stories that I'll tell you tonight, but haven't gotten a permanent place to be on exhibit inside the museum yet. So right now, they're out here for you tonight. A lot of these things have not seen the light of day in years, and so they are thrilled to be out here. Because everything within the museum should be out, but you really can't until you get enough information together for it. What we're going to talk about tonight is the Silversides in the movie. You never knew that our wonderful submarine out here that had been so responsible for winning the entire war single-handedly could be an inspiration for so many different things. So many movies, so many books, so many stories. But tonight we're going to talk about how she inspired one of the movies that defined World War II. You have to remember that during World War II, every aspect of American life is involved in the war effort. Hollywood is no exception. Hollywood is where a lot of people get their information on what's going on. Going to the movies is a pastime that everyone enjoys. You can go out, you can go to the movies, it's affordable, you watch the newsreels, and it's good. One of these movies that was a great propaganda piece, great entertainment, but really great propaganda piece, is Destination Tokyo. And what the Silversides has contributed to Destination Tokyo is the story of an appendectomy. The story of the appendectomy is that on December 23rd, one of the crewmen on the Silversides developed severe appendicitis, and he was close to death. And he was given the option which was given to them all, that the normal thing, that there is only a pharmacist mate on the submarine. And a pharmacist mate's training is similar to that of an emergency medical technician. The person that picks you up when you need an ambulance, stabilizes you, and then transports you to the hospital. They give out medication. The pharmacist mate is not a doctor. A pharmacist mate has never done surgery. A pharmacist mate does not prescribe medication. He only takes care of you until they can get you back to port. This young man had gone septic. He had a choice. He could live or he could die. The captain of the submarine gave this choice to this young man. The pharmacist mate on the sub said he had seen surgery before. He had been in the operating room and he had witnessed it. He had never performed a surgery. So he's given a choice. We can pack you in ice and we could head back to Australia to the base, but it's going to take us 5 days. And in 5 days, I'm sorry, we don't know what your condition will be. We don't know if you're going to be dead. We don't know if you're going to be alive. And it was up to the crew member to decide exactly what he wanted to do, whether or not he wanted to take a chance on being operated on, or whether or not he wanted to take a chance on getting back to base on time in order for this to happen. During this period of time, surgeries were not done very frequently on any submarine. In 1942, there was actually 3 appendectomies done on different submarines throughout the United States Navy. They are not sanctioned. They are not told that they should do this. This is not part of their training. But the men that were on these subs knew it was either have the surgeries or not. What you see in Destination Tokyo is a conglomeration of all 3 of those surgeries. By the end of 1942, the U.S. Navy said no more surgeries. If someone needs surgery, you have to get them back to base. You're not going to do this anymore. So what we have here is the scene from the movie Destination Tokyo, which is such a great propaganda film if you ever wish to watch it. It is just incredible. Now there is sound with this. Where the sound is at the moment, I couldn't tell you. Let me just see. And here, before the surgery is prepared, they're going to say a prayer. And as he's being put to sleep, and we have our gallant our gallant commanding officer, he is going to be the one that's doing the ether. And the cook right there, he's the one that sharpened the blades. He took his good blades out of the kitchen and he sharpened them into medical tools for this. Our pharmacist mate is scared beyond all belief. He's worried. He has one of the other gentlemen holding the textbook open for him. As they apply the ether, the man starts to pray. And it is just a beautiful scene, and I wish the sound was going for you. The surgery actually went on for hours and hours and hours. It actually went on for a total of 4 hours. At one point, he started to wake up, so they increased the amount of ether that they were using. And it is said in several of the record books that everyone had a very calm feeling on the sub. The commander of the sub brought the sub down to the lowest level, 200 feet, where it was safe. They tried to keep it as calm as possible. It's Christmas Eve. It's December 24th, 1942. He was back up walking around and doing everything that he needed to do within 2 weeks. And here you go. It's very dramatic. Just think if you're sitting home in your movie theater in 1943, the valiantry, the glory that they're giving him here. And there you've got the ether going. I'm sorry? It does. And here they're going. Everyone's watching. And the one thing that the cook asks him before he goes under is, "Sonny boy, if you're going to get better, what can I make you as soon as you want? What are you going to want? What are you going to want?" And so the surgery goes on, and the young man, before he goes under, says, "Pappy, if I'm going to make this through, I want you to make me a pumpkin pie." And you'll watch this last scene as he starts to revive, and everyone is worried on the sub, and they show what it's like to be a big family, how close the confines are there. In our surgery that happened on our submarine, it did not happen in the mess hall. It happened on the table in the officer's mess. And so when you take the tour of the sub, you can go down and we'll very, very gladly show you where it happened and everything else that went with it and all the documentation. After you're finished with the presentation tonight, take a moment. This silver box that I have here is the box that the pharmacist mate kept his tools in, and it's marked USS Silversides. It's one of our prized possessions. On top of that, you will see the actual photos that were taken during the surgery that document every aspect of it. And it is one of the wonderful things of submarine lore. Again, these didn't happen again because they banned them. They said no more. As soon as this one is over with, they're like, that's it, no more. Everyone that's sick now needs to go back to base. There's going to be no more operations on the sub. And as you can see, they're worried, they're sweating, the propaganda, they're telling you, let's see. Here's the cook, everyone's concerned, and now you start hearing him finishing his prayer that he started before he went to sleep. Now I recommend that you go and watch the entire video because it is just absolutely well done. Some of the stuff in it is a little far-fetched, but it is just incredible. Now you'll see them saying, the relief here, and watch what our cook is about to do. Very teared up, and our pumpkin pie. So there are a few inaccuracies that happen with the movie, but that's okay. We'll allow it to happen. It's wonderful to know that our surgery was successful, as were the other two. All 3 men survived, and our submarine was part of that. And she's the only surviving sub that there was actually a surgery that took place on. The next part, and here is all the information, and as you said, everything here is documented. These are the actual photos of the surgery and everything that happened, and you can come up and see them. Because one of the things we do here is we preserve our history. It is so easy for our history to get lost. How many wonderful victorious ships during World War II have ended up in the scrap heap? Ours is still here, and it's our duty and it's our honor to protect her and to keep her going. Now this is the wardroom where the surgery actually happened on the submarine. So when you go down and you take your tour, you'll be able to go right there and you'll actually be able to see where this happened. The next movie that the Silversides was involved in was in 2002. It's Below. And it's not really a genre that I'm really great with. I'm much more for the historical documentaries. This is kind of a horror film. But our submarine right out here was towed from her berth right next to the Silversides, right next to the submarine, the museum right here, out into Lake Michigan. And she was used as part of the filming for this. Now, I don't know why my sound is not working, but we will see if it does work this next time through. Here is some of the photos that were taken at the time that she was towed out into the lake, which is quite a feat. I mean, she had not been towed very many times in the last 25 years. She'd been towed here from Chicago, she was downtown, and then she was towed back here. Her engines do work, but because we have a treaty with Canada that there's no warships allowed within the Great Lakes, her propellers are not on. And so even though her motors do work, and you just might be able to guide her, it's not allowed. So her propellers are off, and those are the ones that greet you when you first walk in the door. And here is some of the photos of what it was like when they brought her out to tow her. Now, this has sound, and it's very cool, too, when the sound is there. This is from the movie Below, and I'm only showing you here the first 3-4 minutes of the opening sequence. The rest of the interior of the sub from this was filmed on location in England on a soundstage. This is an English movie, but they did come here in order to, I got to go back one here, in order to get an actual World War II submarine that would work for her. So here she is out in Lake Michigan, just right outside the channel here. And this is just in 2002, so it's just 12 years ago. And it's just an incredible sight. Yeah, they called her the USS Tiger Shark. But I will warn you that when you go to rent it, or get it from the video store, or get it from the library, it is a horror story. So there is a little bit of goriness, a little bit of death, a little bit of non-warlike stuff that's going on. And here she is, and here they are, and this is all done right out in Lake Michigan. Yeah, the sound, I'm sorry. It's just not playing for me here tonight. At least it's not snowing. And the screen is not snowy either, so we're good. And you can see her beauty. You can see how she still looks majestic, even after all of these years. Behind me, which you can see while you're finished watching, are some of the memorabilia that we have been given by the movie makers that we keep in our archives. We have, of course, the movie poster. These are the glad rags that were used on her when she went out to film the movie. These are all replicas. These are to represent the Japanese ships that she sank during the war. They're on the top of the sub, and they decorate it showing this. These are the costumes that were worn by the crew. As you can tell, they're not really, they look great on the set, but they're very cheaply made. Things are ironed on with glue, names are written on, and they wore dungarees. So, not what they would have seen. Okay, our next movie was just filmed here over the summer. Okay, it is a second in a series of Max Maxons. The first one was Max Maxon and something treasure, and this one is Mickey Matson and the Pirate's Code. It was filmed here for 2 days during the summer, and they brought their own crew, and they did everything here. We're not allowed to say the storyline. We're not allowed to say what happens because it hasn't been released yet. It's going to be released over the summer. And these are some of the pictures that I can show you because they were in the Chronicle and they were shown. This is what their representation of our tour guide would look like. He is on the west side. Our actual tour guides, one of our wonderful tour guides, is on the east side here. And that's Gary with an actor showing their representation of a tour guide versus our representation of a tour guide. Our real tour guide. Here are some of the other things that they did. They used the entire exterior of the submarine. They used the deck, and actually some of our staff was extras in the movies as well. So you'll see Teresa and Denise, when the film comes out, as extras when the movie does finally come out over the summer. Now, my favorite one that was filmed here recently is our commercial. And so how I wish the sound was working on this right now so that I could let you see. Here is our commercial. We've gotten a lot of reviews on our commercial. Either you love it or you don't. But you'll see some of our other staff members as part of. Here's Jack. You saw Frank. And this commercial we've been playing on Comcast. And then all the happy children watching everything that's going on the submarine and enjoying it. So in a few minutes, when everything is over and you've had their chance, take a minute to come on up and see all the wonderful things that we do have in our archives. All the wonderful things that we wish we could put out, but we have to, make sure that we put them out in a way that the story is told. And every part of our submarine, there's a story to be told. And you hear so many about the war stories, you hear so many about everything else, but there's so many personal stories that we can go into and tell you about each of the crew members, each of the battles that they were in, each of the times that they were on war patrol, each of the time that they came in to get refit, what happened to her after the war, how she was in Chicago, how she almost became a razor blade, how she almost sank, how then she got brought to us, and how she was restored, and how she's been lovingly cared for over the years, and has caused all this wonderful museum to be. So thank you all for coming, and I guess we have one more presentation tonight.
Peggy, before you depart, could you talk to us a little about donations? What if we've got memorabilia from our family that we'd like to donate? What's the process, please?
The process for having something donated to the museum, if you have something at home and you don't even think that it's like, oh, it's just so-and-so's medal, it's so-and-so's letter, it's so-and-so's uniform, it's, it's not important. It is important. Every little aspect inside the museum is donated to us. It is a very, very rare exception where anything is ever bought. Everything that you see here has all been donated. Oftentimes, the things that we have inside the museum may be held in storage in the archives, very well cataloged, well taken care of, well preserved, for a long time before we get to be able to use it. If you have a chance and you go downstairs and you look at the flyer exhibit, some of those articles that are in the flyer exhibit that are our most important things have been there for years and years. If you take a look at the Torpedo School book that was written by Mr. Cosgrove, drawn up by Mr. Cosgrove, was donated by his family almost 15 years ago. It didn't really come out of storage until last year, until we could put it in a proper place in the proper perspective of it. The guns that are down there were all donated to us over the course of time. And the radio and everything else that's down there, they all come in as donations. Sometimes those donations have to be held on to for a long time. So if you see something at home or you know someone, then, and you think, gosh, that could get lost. That could be just considered nothing. Someone cleaning out a house could just say, let me throw that away. Consider giving it to us because we will take care of it. And if it's not something that we can use as a museum, we might know of another museum that could use it and can pass it along to them so that it doesn't just get lost to history forever.
Thank you very much. And you have one quick question for her, sir?
The geographic location of Silversides when the operation was done.
She, I would have to look up specifically, but she was in the South Pacific. She was a 5-day trip back to Australia. So she was 5 days out. So I can get the precise location for you, but she was 5 days out from Australia. Okay. They would have packed them in ice. The wonderful thing about the submarine is that you don't realize is that they took food storage very, very important. And so they had ice. They had ways to keep things cold. So what they would have done is they would have made him comfortable, they would have given him the antibiotics that they had, and then they would have packed him in ice and hoped for the best. And hope that, by packing him in ice that it would have slowed down his metabolism enough that it wouldn't have gone any further and got him. And they would have radioed ahead so that there would have been a surgeon waiting for him, and they would have known when they were getting into Fremantle for them to be, as long as then they did not run into anything that needed to, say, be a convoy taken out, or that they weren't depth charged or something like that. So you took your chances no matter which way. He was just fine. He was up and about in 2 weeks and back on duty without missing a beat.
Our next speaker, Professor Nick Budimir. Nick has been a sociology professor at our college for several years. Really one of the absolute exceptional young instructors on our campus.
Where did you get the propaganda picture?
Oh, I got this from the police department. Yes, post office
This
was
was
hanging
at
up.
a labor rally, at Western Michigan University.
See, he is one of those type guys. Get involved, rabble rouser. Oh, don't walk away too far, sir. We've got some pressing questions for you. He's going to talk tonight about the Balkans. Really, we look at this part of the world, which was Benito Mussolini's brainchild and really the overreach, and ultimately become Adolf Hitler's quagmire. But before he gets there, We have a very pressing question for you, sir, that this is really the linchpin of the entire presentation.
Are there good, can I guess what the question is?
No, sir. We need to know about the Maniates clan and the Budimir clan. Were you guys friends or foes there? You're both in the same part of the world.
We're technically supposed to be allies, but knowing what the people from the Maniates clan, and their kleptomaniacal activities, I mean, we might have, because we were property owners in Belgrade, and my father was very... we would have locked our doors had the Maniates clan been around.
In other words, we got to keep these guys separate. Please join me in welcoming Nick Budimir.
Just real quick by way of, I'm going to walk around. Can't stand still. Quickly by way of introduction, why am I qualified or not qualified to talk on this subject? I've spent a lot of time studying Balkan history. My family is from the Balkans, as you kind of can tell from Kurt's little introduction here. My father was born in Belgrade 1 year to the day after what we're going to find out is the German invasion and bombing of the city of Belgrade, and he grew up amongst the rubble and the ruins of the city. So growing up, all from the age of 5 or 6, I experienced, inhaled, internalized the trauma that was passed on to my father and my uncle. Daily, they were beaten. Daily, they were yelled at, and that was only from Paja, their parent, my grandfather. So what are we going to look at today? The title of my presentation is Second World War in the Balkans, Occupation, Genocide, and Revolution. I'm going to go fairly fast, so I can hopefully give enough time for maybe a few questions at the very end. Where are we going to go and what are we going to see? We're going to see the socio-political situation, invasion and occupation, genocide, resistance movements, liberation, and the time period we're going to cover is basically from the late 1930s, the socio-political context, all the way up to the end of the war. Now, one other piece of context, you should have heard this information before that absolutely wonderful video conference with Professor Stale from Australia. So this should have been just before Operation Barbarossa. But unfortunately, or fortunately, you're hearing it now, and I hopefully will not try anyone's patience. You're familiar maybe with the Balkans today: Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Greece, Bulgaria, the rump of Turkey in Europe, Albania, forgive me if I'm leaving anyone out, Slovenia, etc. And these are all my brothers and sisters. I am Serbian and Macedonian, so I'm truly a multiracial person. A little bit on Balkan politics. You have to understand, none of these countries, by the time World War II began, none of these countries were democracies. Every single country, by the time 1939 runs around, became either military dictatorships, civilian dictatorships, or royal dictatorships. Especially in the case of Yugoslavia, it was a royal dictatorship by King Alexander and then Prince Regent Pavle later on. This was a response to the peasant radicalism, the Great Depression, and basically unstable political situation going on in the Balkans at this time. 1920s, 1930s, the interwar period is rife with ethnic strife. Major examples of that is between Serbs and Croats inside of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Other ethnic rivalries have to do in Bulgaria and in Greece with the newly settled Macedonians, with the newly settled Turkic or Pontic Greeks from the Pontos, George, the Pontos, that were brought in the 1920s from Asia Minor. So massive ethnic and national rivalries. Greece was recovering from a disastrous war with Turkey in the 1920s, and the Megali Idea was crushed. So this is the Balkan states, basically, another view of them just on the eve of war. Before we go in, why is Hitler specifically, why are the Axis interested in the Balkans? First of all, Hitler viewed the Balkans mainly as a supply of resources and food and minerals. He had no plan to settle German civilians there after conquest. This was not part of it. These were the Untermenschen that would be slave labor. So this was not a high priority for Hitler. Mussolini is a little higher priority, but he did not have the power really, as we'll see, to act. So the Balkans were initially low priority. Very quickly, math problems. Sorry, there's a little math. What was Hitler's strategy? Basically threats, plus diplomacy, plus economic domination and penetration of the peninsula. So he was basically going to economically coerce and diplomatically threaten everybody into an alliance with him. He wanted the Balkans tranquil, he wanted oil and resources, and he wanted to focus on his big goal, which was Lebensraum to the east, the Drang nach Osten, the drive to the east. That was the plan. By November 1940, Hungary and Romania were already on to the Axis. So in a second, I'll show you a map, the expansion of joiners to the Axis Treaty as they sort of come up here. By March, by March, both Yugoslavia and Bulgaria first, Yugoslavia later, signed on to the Axis. Only little Greece was left unallied to the Axis, and you'll see they're the only real holdout until there's a coup d'etat in Yugoslavia. So this is sort of the map. This could be a map as late as February 29th, 1941. The very next day, Bulgaria would have Bulgaria would have signed on, and then 25 days later, Yugoslavia would have signed on. If you look here, Albania, which is the small country between Yugoslavia and Greece, it was already taken over by Italy in 1939. Mussolini had great ideas. His great idea was to take over Albania. So you can kind of see what was the position of Balkan kingdoms in this period. They were feeling economically and politically and militarily stuck between the Reich and the Soviet Union. They could either ally with the Soviet Union for protection or the Reich. The Reich offered more economic help, and the Reich was a little bit more friendly to kingdoms. The Soviet Union was not particularly friendly to kingdoms, but the Yugoslavs and Bulgarians actually had some decent relationships with Russia, so that's not so surprising. The one holdout, General Metaxas, Ioannis Metaxas, he comes to power in the late 1930s. He's basically appointed by King George, thanks George, and becomes basically de facto dictator of Greece. He's sort of a pseudo-fascist in that he has the trappings of fascism, the salutes, the ultra-conservatism, but with none of the racism and dynamism of any of the of fascist Italy or Nazi Germany. Basically, Metaxas was an old-style strongman, but he maintained an alliance with Britain. And that was what was central to what was going on here. What happens, though? We have a problem. Balkan tranquility. Remember the economic exploitation equals Balkan tranquility? That worked until Il Duce bumbles into Greece. First from Albania, he invades Greece. And I said bumbling, right? He's quickly driven back into Albania. The successful Greek forces drive him right into Albania. This becomes a great nationalistic moment for the Greeks. They're extremely happy about this. It becomes basically Greeks claimed much of the land in southern Albania. They called it northern Epirus. But however, very quickly this lands in a stalemate. And both Greek forces and Mussolini's forces are basically stuck there. But something else happens. Metaxas dies. His successor allows British forces to land in Greece. Metaxas would not allow British forces into Greece, so Hitler saw it as, okay, we're fine. We're fine. we just have Greece sitting there, nothing's going to happen. As soon as British expeditionary forces land there, they could possibly put an air base on Crete. Oil fields are threatened. Big problem. So what's happened? I'm jumping ahead. War, invasion, and partition. Yugoslavia was in the tripartite pact, right? Very nice and simple. No. The Serbs, the rowdy Serbs, half of my people, stage a coup d'etat against the Svetkovic-Maček government. They overthrow it. The general Asimovic takes over the government and he pulls them out of the tripartite pact. So Yugoslavia is screwed, right? No, they reverse the tripartite pact and rejoin it. Too late. Hitler is pissed. So what Hitler does, you know the joke about Hitler, right? They made a brandy out of Napoleon. They made a herring out of Bismarck, but they're going to turn Hitler into a pickle. Well, because he's such a sour puss, right? So a furious Führer decides to smash Yugoslavia and Greece for their insolence. Invasion of Greece and Yugoslavia happens 1 year before my father's birthday in 1941. Yugoslavia falls in 12 days, 17,000 dead from aerial bombardment in Belgrade alone. Some Yugoslav units, Croatian units, defect to the Germans. Yugoslavia is dismembered in 12 days. Greece is overrun a few days later. There's an armistice, and the swastika flies over Athens. By April 23rd, we're going to go right to the destruction wrought by Nazi invasion of Yugoslavia and Greece. This is the central train station in Belgrade. You can see the bombing. The big black spot in the middle is where a bomb landed on the central railway station. This is the Nazis, German soldiers, raising the swastika over the Acropolis. And immediately, death ensues. Serb civilians are hanged for opposition. Quite possibly these are communist or opposition forces. So immediate atrocities begin in both Greece and occupied Yugoslavia. This is sort of the route. So you can see Yugoslavia at that time was totally indefensible. It was surrounded on 1, 2, 3, 4 sides by Axis forces. Germany had poured in 29 divisions into Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria. And Greece's lines could not hold. The famous Metaxas line could only hold a few extra days. Totally overrun. Hitler had enough time to redeploy these forces in 1 month to Operation Barbarossa. Incidentally, the argument that the Balkans delayed Barbarossa has been heavily disputed, that the plan was already moved to June well before this period of time. So the argument that the Balkans was a fatal blow is probably not true. It's probably not true. It was just a malicious act, and it didn't divert that many forces away from Barbarossa. What happened here? Harsh occupations in both Serbia and Greece. The army looted Greece, causing a horrible famine. Up to 100,000 starved to death in the winter of 41-42. The new Bulgarian occupiers in Thrace expel about 100,000 Greeks, and 2 different orders against the civilian populations. In Serbia, the order was for every German soldier killed, 100 civilians, doesn't matter who they were to die. In Greece, I found this out too, 50 civilians were to die for every German soldier killed. So the populations were to suffer for their resistance. Yugoslavia was totally dismembered. Romania took the Banat. Hungary took another part of the Banat. The most important point here is that in the middle, the independent state of Croatia swallows up Bosnia, and a puppet state, a puppet fascist state is made in Croatia and Bosnia, headed by the horribly racist, nationalist, and murderous Ustaše, which we'll talk about, that perpetrates a genocide against Jews and Serbs in Croatia. Greece, similarly, first of all of Greece was occupied by the Germans. Then the Germans divided up mostly to Italy, but the centers of Salonika and Athens stay in German hands. So the Germans keep all the important areas and the grain-producing areas of Macedonia and the capital of Athens. But only after Germans loot everything that is valuable, thus contributing to this massive famine in 41. Division of Greece. Bulgaria, since they were part of the Axis forces, gains land, gains this was the dream of my grandparents, to have Macedonia rejoin Bulgaria. So in a way, my Macedonian grandparents, this was their dream, to have Bulgaria look like this. So they would actually, at this time, they would have been a little bit happy had it not been for the Nazi involvement. And then the southern addition on the bottom is Thrace, where the 100,000 Greeks were expelled from. So on to the wonderful fluff piece of genocide, right? What is this genocide? It's one of the least well-known ones of the war. It is the genocide in the Nezavisna Država Hrvatska, the independent state of Croatia, perpetrated by the extremist Ustaše, who were nationalists, fascists, and fanatical Catholics. The Nezavisna Država Hrvatska, independent state of Croatia, and the Ustaša attack and kill Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, Communists, Roma, homosexuals, and others, and Muslims who resisted. Muslims were titularly allied with the Croatians and the Nazis. And these people wanted to create a čista Hrvatska, ethnically pure Croatia. Ustaša set up a notorious camps, the most notorious Jasenovac, which is memorialized by Yad Vashem and the U.S. Holocaust Museum. Number of victims, hard to tell because the documents are so destroyed, so burned. Some, many political distortions. Tito and the communists made it up to be a 1.2 million. Serb nationalists say more. Reasonable historians, somewhere between 340,000 and 600,000, according to Stephen Sowards of Michigan State. So, enormous numbers. If you really have a soft stomach, be careful. There's some gross pictures. This is among the grossest one. Recognize some characters here. Göring is on the right. The sourpuss himself, Adolf, is on the left. In the very center, looking really stern, is Ante Pavelic. He is the leader of the wartime independent state of Croatia, the arch enemy of Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, and belligerent Muslims. Two bodies left to rot, middle of the field, possibly Jews, possibly Serbs, middle of a field outside Jasenovac. One of the small camps riddled with bodies after a orgy of violence, a killing spree. There were no such thing as gas chambers here. Everything was blunt butts of guns, shots to the head, and severing of heads with axes and swords. So you can imagine the barbarity, burning to death in churches. They would lock entire villages in churches and burn them down. Children at either one of the camps or orphanages. We have no idea, at least no easy way to find out what happened to them. Then might be dead. May have survived the war. We don't know. This gentleman, this victim, head was literally bashed in, not uncommon. There's a weird thing about this genocide. There was a move to physically deface the other, possibly because the hatred was the idea that Croats were related to Serbs, which is of course true, might have had some psychological effect that I want to literally rip your face off because it looks like me. So just a speculation. That's all I'm doing on the independent state of Croatia. I told you I'm going very short. What about the Balkan Jewish Holocaust? We have a hugely mixed bag here. There were massive deaths, like in the case of Yugoslavia and Salonika, that lost nearly all of their Jewish population, and then Bulgaria saved all of its Jewish population. Incredible. Italian-occupied areas did pretty well. The Italians, their fascism was, I don't want to say fascism light, but they were not so fanatical anti-Semites as Nazis and Ustaše. 80% of Yugoslavia's Jews were killed. This is one of the highest percentages next to Poland. Almost all of the Jews of Salonika were killed also in 1943 in one fell swoop. That was 60,000 individuals summarily deported to Auschwitz. And in Bulgaria, the Orthodox Church, along with members of the parliament, were able to save a large number of Jews. Talked about in David Bar-Zohar's book about saving the Bulgarian Jewry. Albanians sheltered Yugoslav Jews. King Boris of Yugoslavia, he was not he didn't really like Hitler, but he felt his position was stuck. He was stuck in a position of having to be an ally. He dies in mysterious circumstances in about 43-44. Resistance movements, really quick. There's two resistance movements. There's the royalist movement in Yugoslavia, the Chetniks, who collaborated and they were loyal, basically Serb nationalists. And then there was the communist partisans, and they were activists and they were multinational, right? So two movements, the nationalist kings movement and the communists. Here are their two leaders, Draža Mihailović. This was my father's hero. I don't like the guy because I don't like kings and monarchy. My family were monarchists in Yugoslavia. I actually prefer Tito because he's multiracial, multi-ethnic. Tito ends up being the most important resistance leader of Yugoslavia. There was basically pan-Balkan resistance that dealt with everything, sabotage, strikes, armed fighting. It was all over the Balkans. There was all kinds of these different types of resistance. And we have a great number of Allied pilots who were downed. One of my anthropology professors, his father was downed in Bosnia, rescued by the partisans, stayed there 3 weeks and flown out. And I believe one of our, somebody who was here, their father was actually rescued, and they told me that a few weeks ago. So many Allied pilots were rescued by Balkan resistance movements. Chetniks, the royalists collaborating sometimes with German soldiers. Greek partisans, they armed the women, and in a patriarchal society, agrarian society, the women loved the guns. Captured Yugoslav partisans, I have a feeling they were executed very soon after. That deals with this massive death toll. Great picture. This was local communist leader Stjepan Filipović in this great resistance pose, shouts out, "Resist!" and then they hang him. I can't remember offhand the town, but you see all of the German soldiers and local Ustaše forces there. One German soldier, I thought this picture was interesting. One German soldier said that they would not participate in killings of civilians, and they killed him along with the other 16 partisans. By 44, partisan fighting had liberated most of Yugoslavia by themselves, one of the only countries to do that. I think the only country in Europe to have self-liberated itself. All the red areas are basically liberated and semi-liberated by the partisans. They controlled the mountains and the rural areas. Tito, sitting pretty at the end of the war, captured most of rural Yugoslavia, force of 300,000 by the end of 1944, captures, tries, and kills Mihailović. and the partisans liberate Belgrade a day before the Soviets enter, and he says, "Thank you very much, Red Army. We thank you for your service. Please leave." There was sadly, I am sometimes a fan of the Red Army. There was a horrible rape campaign that the Red Army conducted in Belgrade. 15,000 rapes, perhaps, one historian talked about. Palestinian Jewish volunteers parachuted in to assist the partisans in fighting against Ustasha and Nazi terror against Jews. This is brand new stuff. I had never known this before. I thought that was amazing and fascinating. So they came all the way from Palestine. This was a voluntary force to basically to join the Allies as spies and liaisons. The Greek resistance, there were basically, again, two resistance movements in Greece. There was the pro-royalist Greeks, which were basically the Republican army, much smaller, Edas, and the much larger Elas, which basically it sounds like saying hello in Greek. They were much larger, so in both Yugoslavia and in Greece, the communist forces were much stronger and much more active in fighting the Nazis. It kind of makes sense, right? The people who are fighting the occupiers and the people who said you shouldn't be poor anymore recruited more followers. And by the end of the war, the kind of Elas was fighting with the British occupiers, which was kind of strange, and probably eventually led to the fall of Elas and why Tito did not fall so quickly. Conclusion and aftermath. I know I'm flying through this, right? Yugoslavia ended up losing about 1 million people to the war. That was the third largest percentage of the entire war. Largest percentage was Poland. I think the second largest percentage was China. Yugoslavia was third. Russia was fifth as a percentage of population. Greece lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 325,000 people to the war through harsh occupation. We can hardly imagine. I mean, this is percentages of population. If you think about U.S. losses in World War II, it was close to 0.1% of the population. And this is 10% of the population. Romania lost 800,000 people, mainly in the last year or two of the war, to fighting on the Russian front. Communist forces come to power basically in Yugoslavia by themselves, or in Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, etc., by the force of the Red Army. By 1948 is the year. Balkan states have had to deal with the legacy of this war, the political conflicts caused by the legacy of this war for decades. It's a horrible inheritance, economic deprivation, and massive political problems today. Recently, in the last 15 to 20 years, the wounds of World War II were very unfortunately and I think very cynically manipulated by people like Milosevic in Serbia. I'm blanking on the former president of Croatia's name, and Alija Izetbegovic in Bosnia. But it's truly, if you're not Balkan, you don't quite understand it. This was our civil war. If you know how Southerners feel about the South will rise again, well, many of us, many Balkan people feel as prideful over or as harmed by the losses, the deaths of World War II, as perhaps maybe Southerners felt resentment in the 19-teens and 20s. With that, I'd like to say Hvala vam, Efaristo, thank you very much.
Again, Nick, thank you very much. This is exactly the type of instructor we need to keep at our college. Before you walk out, sir, Nick teaches a very interesting labor history course. Could you tell us a few things about that course, how that's structured, and what makes that course different and unique, please?
Stay here, Kurt. That course is basically thanks to the work of George and Kurt here. In the fall, we're going to have a lecture series that is going to be in some ways very similar to this. We're going to have guest speakers all on issues of labor and working class history, unionization, right to work, the political and economic history of industrialization. It will most likely be held back at the college. We had one successful year this last fall, and thanks to George and Kurt's inspirational leadership, we're going to have it back again. So look for Labor Studies, Labor History Lecture Series in the fall. And I want to thank you all very kindly for, hopefully I wasn't too dull and boring. Thank you, sir.
Very much. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Again, we're going to put out a little plea for some help right now. We need your help. If you've enjoyed this series, if you've enjoyed the many guest speakers, students, if you felt this is a good education, community members, if you felt this is a good expression of your community college, along with our partner museums, I'm asking if you would please take down Dr. Dale Nesbury's name and contact information. He would love to hear from you. Would love to hear from you. Now, students, you only know how to use that emblem up in the corner there, the email. That's all they know. Post office, these are for anybody in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. If you're over 70, Western Union telegrams, please. There you go, Pony Express. Students, same thing though. If this is a program that you have felt beneficial, let the president of the college know. Community members, if this is a program you have felt beneficial, let Dr. Nesbury know. And if you have any complaints or negative, well then talk to George. He's good at that. But we would appreciate your help on this. Richard Malawi's been working on a veterans documentation program for years and would really like to just put a call out for anyone in the community. If you've known a veteran who has not been documented, Mr. Malawi is sitting right over here in what we call the Roosevelt chairs, and please contact him after the program for any veterans who have not been documented. Thank you for coming. We will see you next week at 6 o'clock.